Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1. Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation this morning will be delivered by Pastor Robert Lawson from the Bethel Temple Church on West Vickery in Fort Worth. Thank you very much, sir, for being here today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Father in heaven, we give thanks to this commission, and we give thanks to our government, and we pray that the men and women having authority over this meeting today, that their hearts and minds will come together, and we ask that you will cause the men and women in this place today to have the integrity to do the things that they are looking for in righteousness. And we also ask, dear God, that you will bring to light what is hidden in darkness, and that you will cause each and every one in this place today to be blessed in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Pastor, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Manius?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have 4 announcements as it relates to the agenda this morning. The first one is under the Domestic Relations section, which is item 8G1. This is a request for interim funding for FY14. We're going to ask that we remove that item from the agenda. We were notified yesterday that our funding has come through, and so there's not a need for an interim funding request. Under elections,
Thank you.
item H1, there is a revised court communication in your red folder this morning. Also under elections, item H6, there is a revised court communication as it relates to the resolution for a joint election for November 5, 2013. And then finally, members of the Court, under Public Health, item 8L7. There's a revised court communication. It was just an amount change. The amount difference was less than $1, but we wanted to be absolutely correct on these court communications, so we submitted a revised court communication as it relates to that particular issue. Also, Your Honor, you might note that we are going to have several public hearings this morning as it relates to the setting of the tax rate for both the county and the hospital district. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of March the 20th.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Wynn, I believe you had a request from the court.
Yes, sir. Would you please consider closing today's court in honor of Council Member Bill Thorne of Grand Prairie, who just recently passed away, I believe, a day or 2 days ago.
The funeral's this morning, right now.
The funeral is going on right now at 10 o'clock.
So we'll close in memory of Bill Thorne, who is a city council person in Grand Prairie.
We also lost a councilman, I was told, in Haltom City yesterday. The fellow that was in the wheelchair, Hispanic member of their, but I can't remember the name.
We might see if we can get that, and if we can, then we'll close in memory of both of those. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
you helped him out to his car.
Get out this car.
That's right.
Based upon that hill, yeah, I can imagine.
You really live on a hilltop.
Yeah, I know. His name is Trent.
We'll do that, and we'll get that other name for y'all. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda.
Move for approval of the
Second.
consent agenda.
We have a motion, a second. Any questions, discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have several public hearings today, so we will, we actually have two that we're going to do. The couple were on the consent.
Thank you, Your Honor. We could go to item A under the public hearings. We're going to request that the Commissioners Court conduct a public hearing regarding tax year 2013 tax rate for Tarrant County government. Also would like to announce the date, time, and place of the vote of the tax rate, which is as follows. The vote will be on September 10th, 2013 at 10 a.m. It will be held in the Tarrant County Administration Building, 100 East Weatherford Street, Fort Worth, Texas. The benchmark rates for tax year 2013, which is our fiscal year 14, are as follows. The effective tax rate is .263367 per $100 valuation. The rollback tax rate is .287324 per $100 valuation. The current tax rate is .264, and our proposed tax rate is the same, which is .264 per $100 valuation.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak to this matter. There being none, then I will close the public hearing. There's no action to be taken at this time.
Your Honor, we could go to item B under public hearings. We're requesting that the Commissioners Court conduct a public hearing today regarding tax year 2013 tax rate for the Tarrant County Hospital District, and we're announcing that the Commissioners Court will vote on that tax rate on September 10th, 2013 at 10 o'clock a.m. in the morning, Tarrant County Administration Building, 100 East Weatherford Street in Fort Worth, Texas. The benchmark rates for tax year 2013 for the hospital district are as follows. The effective tax rate is .227527 per $100 valuation. The rollback tax rate is .246767 per $100 valuation. The hospital district's current tax rate is .227897, and the proposed tax rate is the same as the current tax rate, which is .227897 per $100 valuation.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak to this matter. There being none, then I will close the public hearing, and again, there's no action to be taken at this time. Mr. Manius, the Emergency Service District, I know we had a public hearing last Tuesday. I know we have a public hearing this Tuesday. Those public hearings do not have to take place here, even though we are the ones that ultimately set that tax rate?
That's correct. In fact, the law requires that they be held in the district, and that is the unincorporated area.
In the unincorporated area. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Johnson and I attended the public hearing last week, and it was well attended. There were probably over 100 folks there. Jay laid out the information with regards to that, and I think what you're going to see from that is certainly the folks there last week, there were 3 proposals that we were looking at. One was to maintain the current tax rate. The other was to have a tax increase of approximately a penny. And then the other was to raise the tax rate from about 6.5 cents to 8 cents. We did a little straw poll of the folks that, like I said, over 100 folks that were there. With no exceptions, everyone there supported the 8-cent tax rate. There were no one who supported the current. No one supported the single penny increase. Each and every person there supported going at the 8 cents in order to be able to maintain the services that they currently had and felt like they wanted and needed.
Their problem is, and you'll hear it again tonight, I think you're going out.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to go out there
I
tonight.
will be there.
But you
I
are?
plan to be there, yeah.
But what their problem is their gas tax revenue loss has dropped considerably, and it's crippling these fire departments. We're going to have to do something to help them out. So I'll be interested to see what you find out. I am going to Austin later this afternoon, and I won't be at that meeting, but it was unanimous, and the judge put it to the people, do you want a tax increase? And they're the only ones, those of us who live in unincorporated Tarrant County are the only ones that tax increase applies to, not the entire county.
And as Commissioner Johnson, the vast majority of the decrease in revenue is caused by that decrease in the natural gas, the value of the natural gas royalties. But in addition to that, each year there's certain annexations that occur, and anytime one of the cities annexes any of that unincorporated property, that pulls that off of the role of the emergency service district and places it into the role of the city.
And they're not going to take land that is not already occupied by business or a lot of houses.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot more revenue off each time that they annex a piece of property in the county.
So with that, we'll move on now to Mr. Manius, your section of the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner. Judge. I was going to say that the gentleman from Haltom City is Richard Garcia.
Right, Councilman Richard Garcia.
Members of the court, if we can go to the administrator's section, we have 6 additional items we'd like to bring to you this morning. Let me make a comment about all 6 of these before I start. All of these are requests for interim funding. These programs, their fiscal year ends August 31st. It's a state funding. We anticipate receiving those grants. We simply haven't received them yet. So as we go to the first one, we're requesting that the court approve interim funding in the amount of $8,000 for the Family Drug Court.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
On item number 2, we're requesting interim funding in the amount of $20,000 for the Juvenile Drug Court.
Move for approval.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
On item number 3, we're requesting interim funding for the Juvenile Services First Offender Program in the amount of $13,400.
Move for approval.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the court, on item number 4, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve interim funding from Juvenile Services Life Skills Training Program. This is an amount of $13,400.
Move for approval.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the court, on item number 5, this is interim funding we're requesting for the District Attorney's Protective Order Unit. This is for an amount of $13,500.
Move approval.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Finally, on item number 6, we're requesting interim funding in the amount of $8,000. This is for the Sheriff's Victim Assistance Program.
Move approval.
Second.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Just a note on all those, that was for 60 days worth of funding for each of those programs. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Ms. Tidwell?
We have 2 items for the court to consider this morning. The first is to receive and file the Tarrant County financial statements for the period ended July of 2013.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And the other is to receive and file the auditor's report regarding the calculation of the tax increment financing payments for the year ended tax year 2012. This is just a report that's really for your information, and because it's a huge amount of work for our office, it's a manual process. There isn't any fancy software. SAP is not configured to do this. We do this basically through downloads and Excel, and It took one of my staff pretty much 2 months to complete it. So just wanted to provide you the information. Obviously, it's very important to the cities that they look forward to getting their checks, and just wanted you to be aware that we do this. We've been doing it, obviously, for quite some time.
Thank you for that very, very helpful report. Move to receive.
Very large amount, too. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Let me ask a question. I mean, what changes, I mean, I guess there are changes year to year based upon property, but isn't it, could we not set up something like a worksheet that would just plug in those amounts?
We're working on, Susan Black did the work this year. She's here in the office, in the audience today. Her technical skills are more advanced than the gentleman's who'd been preparing the report. One of the problems you have, though, is things move in and out of the properties, and then there's the amounts that are actually collected. And we looked at doing this nice overall approach that would have said, let's just go ahead and remit all the money based on what should have been collected, and of course, we can't do that. Because ultimately it will be collected at some point, but no, that didn't work out. So then it becomes very tedious to actually go in. We're going to work at building a new database and trying to make it less cumbersome. I mean, Susan, again's the person if you want to get down into the weeds. She lives in the weeds for weeks and weeks. We have a joke in my office that every time I see her, I'm like, no, stop, no tiff. Because she's coming to talk TIF, and I'm like, I don't want to talk TIF. But
Thank you, Susan.
Anyway, it's for
Please
your
vote.
information.
Motion
Thank you.
passes unanimously. Mr. Sugar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Criminal courts are requesting 60-day funding for the Veterans Diversion Court, the Mental Health Diversion Court, the Adult Drug Court, and the Domestic Violence Unit. These two, the fiscal year, are state-funded grants. The Veterans Court, we need $37,000 for 60 days. The Mental Health Diversion Court, we need $14,000, and for the Drug Court, we need $38,000. We have received preliminary word from the state that we are receiving funding. We're also requesting $20,000 for the Domestic Violence Diversion Program. We have not received word on funding on that, but we anticipate a resolution in some capacity in the next 2 weeks.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Greg, I appreciate this. Also, you just thought you were just going to walk away, didn't you?
Yes, I did, sir.
I would say that last week, while we were on the Indigent Defense Commission, we approved a grant to expand the Bell County software. Tarrant County is one of the participants in that. The Indigent Defense Commission approved $1.5 million to be spent over basically a 3-year period of time that will take the program that was developed in Bell County, enhance it, expand it, and implement it in 9 other counties across the state, one of which is Tarrant County. We are the biggest of those 9 counties. And so I think that, the Indigent Defense Commission is not only paying for the increased development, they're also paying for the implementation, and they're paying for the maintenance and operation for the next 3 years. So that's something that I think will be helpful to your appointment process, as well as other things.
We're very excited about it. It's the automating the appointment process, but working with the auditor's office, actually the automation of the payment of the attorneys, which is very arduous and manual at this point. We're really hoping this process will expedite that a lot.
Well, and we're still trying to work out exactly the details, and so I would encourage Renee, whoever in your office is working on this, as well as y'all, to be very active with Charles Gray in the Tech Share area, or whoever's this project's ends up. I know GK's already been talking about it.
Yeah, and for the court's information, Greg has been running point for us on this particular one.
And then the other thing I want to thank you for is I met with the judges a couple of weeks ago to try to work and to begin some process of reconcilement on the bailiff's situation, and I appreciate the judges' response and their willingness to try to find a way to work through things, and to whatever extent you can help in that go-between between the judges and the sheriff's office. I would
I'll do the
appreciate
best I
that.
can, sir.
Thank you. Did we vote? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We're going to wait till after. We'll remove domestic relations. Steve, come on forward.
Good morning, Your Honor, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have several items for you related to the November election for constitutional amendments, and we're having a joint election with a number of other political subdivisions. First off, we're asking your approval of the early voting sites for the general and special elections. You have revised back up on this item 40 permanent and 2 temporary locations for this election. This is mostly our regular early voting sites. We do have a couple of additions at the request of the City of Arlington and Fort Worth ISD, and we've had a couple of locations that have moved that were no longer available to us.
Move for approval of the early voting sites.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Okay. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
It also would help if you could identify which precincts these are in for us
Okay. Yes, sir, we can do that.
in the future.
Yes, sir. Item 2 is the appointment of additional county election judges and alternate election judges. This is 21 names to fill vacancies in the term of election judges that ends next July.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item 3 is a request for approval of Election Day polling location changes for the November election. This affects 35 county voting precincts. Mostly these are places that were no longer available to us.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our last item, we are requesting approval of precinct combinations for this election. This does not change anyone's Election Day voting location. All it does is allow us to use one set of workers and voting equipment at a polling location where there are multiple voting precincts.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. What cities or entities, I know we've got the constitutional, and I know Fort Worth ISD is, I think they've pared theirs down and have called that special election now. I don't know that I don't know if they formally have or not.
We have the City of Arlington. These are cities: Arlington, Bedford, Crowley, Everman, Grand Prairie, Haltom City, Keller, Richland Hill, Sansom Park, White Settlement, Azle School District, not Eagle Mountain, Fort Worth ISD, Lake Worth ISD, and the Benbrook Water Authority.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Steve, question. Can you talk about the new voter ID law, the new requirements?
Well, we are working to implement that for November, and actually a special election that we're conducting in a few weeks for the Eagle Mountain Saginaw School District.
Okay.
The voter is now required to show photo ID, and there's a specific list of acceptable documents that are state issued or issued by the federal government. If a voter arrives at the polling place without that, they have the option to go home or to their car to get the ID and come back, or they can vote a provisional ballot, and they have 6 days after Election Day to come to our office to show their ID to validate their provisional ballot.
Okay. And if a voter doesn't have an ID, how can they get one?
A voter can go to any DPS office and get what's called an election identification certificate, which is a free ID that's offered at DPS. Of course, they have to show their birth certificate or some other, information to prove their identity to get that. But
And it's free of charge.
yes, sir.
Now, but if they don't have the birth certificate, what's our charge for getting them the birth certificate?
I don't know that information. That sounds right to me.
So I guess, and so that's going to be, that seems to be one of the sticking points is that while the ID may be free, they may have to get a birth certificate. Do you know whether or not if we were issuing the voter ID, or if we were issuing the ID, could the clerk's office simply verify that they've got the birth certificate without having to actually print off a copy, verify that, and then allow our folks to actually do the ID here with?
We can verify your birth certificate if you're born in the state of Texas. If you weren't born in Tarrant County, we'd have to query the state to make that validation. The state will charge us for it.
What's the charge from the state?
One says a couple dollars per transaction.
You know, there's been a lot. Last week we saw that, you know, Dallas entered into the lawsuit or decided to. I mean, if we're going to end up spending dollars, I would much prefer us to see if we could not find a way to help our citizens get the IDs as opposed to just, you know, get into that situation. I certainly don't want to enter into any lawsuit or participate in any of that. But
I would echo that. I think whatever we can do outside of the normal procedure to make sure that we have public announcement that voters out there know about the new rule and what they can do to obtain the ID and what we are willing to do to help them obtain those IDs. Are we doing some of that already?
Well, we really just begun. We're going to be reaching out to different organizations with information, but the Secretary of State's office is also going to be conducting a statewide information campaign to reach out to voters, a media campaign that they're going to be doing statewide.
so it would be, I mean, if you're telling us that there's a fee if we have to tap into the state to find out, it would be interesting to explore whether or not the state would be willing to waive that fee if they did that, and then whether or not we could set up something that would allow us to be able to provide a photo for that amount.
I believe that they've identified the specific photos that or IDs that can be used, and
It's very specific, the acceptable IDs, and the free ID is issued by DPS. I mean, it's a specific document called the Election Identification Certificate. So,
But isn't it not a government ID? Isn't that our government photo? What's the specific requirement of what the photo has to be?
it can be a passport, it can be a driver's license, it can be a concealed weapon, handgun license.
military ID. I mean,
Military
there's a
ID.
very specific list of which documents are acceptable.
You know, one thing we might check, though, trying to get to where you're talking about, Judge, is maybe we can work with the DPS to see if we can provide that information through the clerk's office.
Electronically,
Yes.
without there being a charge.
Right, to them, because all the DPS wants to see is that birth certificate. So that may be something. Actually, the DPS is coming up, and we're going to be talking to them about setting up another site in the early part of September.
So maybe the site could be in some of our sub-courthouses or in our...
It would be this was an item that Commissioner Brooks had requested that we do in the Miller Street, or Miller Avenue facility. But while we have the gentleman from DPS here, we can talk to him about this other issue.
Well, I'd like for us to look at that possibility. I'd like for us to discuss, you know, with them also possibly extended hours or something along that type lines. Because the complaints that I have heard, I mean, I feel like that the ID is a good approach. The complaints that I've heard thus far have been over the cost and have been over the inability sometimes to possibly be able to get to a location at hours when they're open. It can do that, but I think that's some possibilities.
We'll have those conversations with that officer when he comes.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Lynn.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Glenn.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
We have two items for the court this morning. The first item, we're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
There a motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item, we're asking the court to approve an out-of-class pay extension for Precinct 2. The Assistant Field Operations Director assumed the duties of the Director of Field Operations back in March, and the Commissioner is requesting an extension of that out-of-class pay through the end of November. The fiscal impact we're estimating to be approximately $10,300, and that impact will be to the Road and Bridge Fund.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brewer?
Good morning.
Here come your friends.
We have two items for your approval this morning. The first is for interim financing for fiscal year 2014 for our BioSense grant. And I just want to say that all of the ones we brought last week related to the consolidated contract with the state, we have received. And we'll bring forward next week to court.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is approval of a provider agreement with AmeriGroup Texas, Inc. for HIV-related services in the Public Health Department's Preventive Medicine Clinic.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Beecham,
Mr.
I noticed Steve had a nice tie on today. Yours doesn't look so good.
What about his?
His has never looked good.
What do you got, Jack?
It looks fabulous.
It's a tie day.
We have three items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2013-070. This is an RFP for transportation services for the Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program. Recommendation be to award per the contract terms to Durham School Services. We're also seeking contract approval from the court.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2013-093. This is our annual contract for printed forms for elections administration. Our recommendation would be to award on a per enterprise basis, awarding to the primary, secondary, and alternate vendors meeting all specifications. The low bidder, however, was a company called Jaden Graphics. They were our previous awardee. We had recorded past performance issues, and I was going to say that Mr. Rayburn unfortunately wore his LSU tie, but he is here to talk about those performance issues if you want specific details.
Court members, any would you like to hear from?
No.
Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our last item is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2013-106. This is an RFP for on-site language interpretation services for the Health Department. Our recommendation would be to award per the contract terms, awarding to the primary, secondary, and alternate vendors of Shawnee Court Communique.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
We play the University of Louisiana at Lafayette Saturday at 3. Thank you.
Well, that high school team you should be able to beat.
Is that La La Lou?
La La Lou, yeah, La La Lou.
One of them.
Appointments. Mr. Commissioner Wynn.
Yes, I move to appoint Jerry McCullough onto the CPS board to replace Ms. Regina Nichelle Howell Foster, who resigned. Jerry is the former superintendent of Arlington ISD.
Second.
Which board is it?
CPS.
We have a motion and a second, and he's gone through all the background checks and got all that.
Yes,
taken care of. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have two items to bring to you this morning. You might notice a slight change in our wording on our briefing as it relates to public health. We have various issues that we'd like to brief the court on this morning from public health. Dr. Curian is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Fortunately for us, things are slowing down. So I'll be briefing you on two main items today, West Nile virus and measles, and anything else you would like for me to address. As far as West Nile virus goes, last week, 161 mosquito samples were tested in our public health lab. 2 of the 161 tested positive for West Nile. These 2 specimens were from the city of Grapevine, and Grapevine has sprayed in response to these positive samples. So this brings the total of West Nile virus positive samples for the city of Grapevine to 8, which is the highest among all Tarrant County municipalities this season. We were also notified last week about a positive sample from City of Arlington. Again, this specimen was tested by the private contractor, and City of Arlington also has sprayed in response to this positive sample. So this is their second West Nile virus positive sample this season. So thus far this season, we have 14 West Nile virus positive mosquito samples, 8 from Grapevine, 2 from Pantego, 2 from Arlington, 1 from Grand Prairie, and 1 from White Settlement. In the unincorporated area, we have no human cases, no West Nile virus positive samples thus far this season. However, we have been spraying in this unincorporated area in response to increasing Culex mosquito densities. And one such location was identified, which was in Precinct 3, and the spraying was completed yesterday. Thus far, we have 2 human cases. Last week, a second case was reported to us. The second case was from the city of Keller. This was a man in his 60s and was categorized as the neuroinvasive, West Nile neuroinvasive disease. So we have 2 cases, one from Fort Worth and one from Keller. Statewide, we have 210 West Nile virus positive samples from 8 counties, 19 human cases, 3 viremic donors, and no deaths. So that's all I have for West Nile.
These numbers are still significantly below what we had last year.
Last year, by this time, in comparison, we had 219 human cases and 84 West Nile virus positive samples. And last year, by this time, we were tapering. We had peaked, and we were already on the decline as far as the positive samples and human cases goes. So,
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Measles-wise, again, this is the biggest outbreak in Tarrant County in the past 20 years. And we have 16 cases to date.
How many?
16. 16. 1-6.
From 11 last week?
From 11 last week, yes, correct.
Wow.
Yes. And the age range of these cases are from 4 months to 44 years. 9 of these 16 cases are children under 10 years of age. 11 of these 16 were unimmunized. 5 were possibly immunized. We are still in the process of verifying their immunization. We can't find any records of immunization on these people. The good news is that all 16 are out of their period of infectiousness, meaning they can no longer transmit the illness to others.
You said 4 months to how old?
4 months to 44 years old.
Okay.
Okay.
When's the last time? Well, obviously, the last week we found 5. We've seen 5 new cases.
Mm-hmm.
You said these 16 are all outside of their
Period of infectiousness, yes.
But we don't know yet whether or not we've seen the end of that yet.
Exactly. We do have few suspects we are still following up on. And if you look at these 16 cases, the last case had a rash onset on 8/21. So if you add in, cases infectious 4 days before and 4 days after the rash onset, so if you take that into account, take incubation period into account, if you don't get any more new cases until the 2nd week of September, it is safe to assume that this cluster is pretty much over with.
Okay.
However, we do have some suspects we are still following up on. So.
Are these 16 cases still contained in one specific area?
Yes, good. Thank you for bringing that up. All 16 of these are either directly or indirectly linked to that primary case. We still haven't identified, fortunately for us, any sporadic cases or random cases in the community. So all of them are still associated with that organization that's been implicated. Okay.
Any other questions, court members, at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members of court, we are going to ask that we go into close now, but when we come back, we are going to have some budget discussions. So we're going to hold that until after closed session today. With that, Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
Then we'll now recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempted under sections 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Having returned from our closed session, we'll now address the following matters.
Yes, under DA's office, the first item is Jesus Quintana requesting authorization for the county judge to sign a settlement agreement settling this traffic accident case by payment of $8,500 to Jesus Quintana and the law office of James and Stanley, requesting that this check be that we authorize the auditor to pay this claim without it first appearing on the claims register.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Second item stems from the same traffic accident, requesting authorization for the county judge to sign a settlement agreement and issuance of a check in the amount of $13,000 payable to Maria Quintana and the law office of James and Stanley, requesting also that this claim be paid prior to it appearing on the list of claims.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, members of the court, if we could now move to the briefing item and go to the item concerning the FY14 budget. We have several issues we'd like to address with the court at this time. Ms. Snyder, do you want to make any comments?
Well, we have here, wait, I'm going to get in trouble.
I'll do the other one.
It's on. We have here what we consider to be the pending issues from the budget hearing. Where's Rick?
You might step in the back. I'll go get him.
I may have to do this twice, hold on. Wait. Okay, I'm sorry. There's a sync process where I can see my screen as well as you see it. Anyway, this is what we have as the pending issues from the budget hearings. And if you'd like to discuss those individually, or if there's something that the court would like further discussion on. But basically, they're the, I was trying to, oh, well, not trying to. Listed below are the positions that were requested by the DA's office that weren't initially included in the recommendations. The litigation support specialist for open records in the civil division, a CPS attorney, and if you'll remember, our recommendation was to eliminate a position in economic crimes. The crime analyst liaison, that's the person who, because of some changes with the city of Fort Worth, has eliminated the position that had typically been responsible for organizing and making sure the Fort Worth Police Department in particular were timely in court for trials. paralegal for redaction, I'm sorry, 2 paralegals for the redaction purposes. And then there was a request to reclass all the attorneys in the DA's office. The Sheriff's Department, there was a pending request for additional bailiffs. And then with County Criminal Court number 5, there was a potential loss of grant revenues. Now, that's something we don't have any positive knowledge of yet. And I do have a follow-up discussion with Judge Cummings today. So this one in particular, I'd like for it to stay on the pending list until we get some more information. On the Sheriff's Department, one of the things we looked at was the positions that have become vacant in that division during the year. You can see some of them had high numbers of terminal benefits, which they typically do not ask that those positions be waived for terminal benefits. In an effort to assist the Sheriff's Department with hiring, we have a recommendation that we consider waiving all but 120 hours of any terminal benefits to hopefully allow them to fill those positions quicker. As of today, there are 10 vacant positions, with one of them actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to say 9, because one of them actually got a projected fill date of September 3rd.
So basically, and then also in my meeting with the judges, I think they're going to try to be a little bit more aware of the bailiff situation and their bailiffs, and I think hopefully Greg will be able to work his magic with some of those folks. And so to that end, I think given that recommendation on the 120, that I would recommend that we do that and not, at this point in time, authorize any additional positions. And I also would like to at least ask the sheriff to rethink, and I understand we're sitting here, the whole security issue with regards to that guard down at their parking garage there in the Tim Curry building, because I do believe that that particular location where when the car comes in, somebody could pull in behind them or walk right in, that in my mind, that guard is a little bit more critical. And if he, and just get some sort of a response back with regards to that particular guard. I know that he's also removed the guard, I believe, from downstairs in this building. And at this point in time, I don't think it's a big issue for him.
And just to put it a little bit behind the recommendation behind 120 hours, I mean, basically, as I look through these 18 positions that became vacant during the year, four of them were transfers in from other divisions. One was a transfer out to another division. But the assumption was based on the fact if they do have to hire from outside, and assuming they have an active list, then they still have a little bit of background investigation to do, and if they're hiring from the outside, anybody would have to give 2 weeks' notice. So basically, we just said, okay, it's going to take you 3 weeks at a minimum to get a new hire in. So that's what that was based on.
What's the status of the lieutenant that he was requesting?
We added that during the budget hearing.
We did do, the court voted to include that in next year's budget.
So basically,
Were we notified that they were going to cut the security here?
We were not.
Or at the courthouse and the parking garage?
We were not.
And nor were the judges. They just drove in and they weren't there.
Okay, I guess he's hired bailiffs to take those 2 places.
so basically that leaves us with the positions that were requested in the DA's office.
Let's do this. If we're ready to take a vote on the recommendation, then I ask that you take a yes/no vote, a yes or support.
So, and basically we're talking about the Sheriff's Department and the Judicial Division only for this recommendation?
Yeah, the 3 security deputies, which is a no, and the 120 hours for term benefits, which is a yes.
For the Judicial Division?
That's correct.
I'll make a motion.
That's your recommendation?
Yes, sir.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion second. All, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Now moving along to the DA's request. I guess what you're not changing your recommendations to not do this.
That's correct.
So basically, the DA is requesting this. From my standpoint, I would say I agree with the Budget Office's recommendations with regards to the reclass, with regards to the probably all of those. I mean, I understand the open records deal is more and more of an issue. The redaction, again, I think in those instances, we are assuming liability and nothing has changed by us trying to go in there. I mean, we're going to give it to the attorney. The attorney is responsible for it. We give them a clean copy, so now we're going to have to go through and do two copies. One, I'm not even sure we should be giving them a redacted copy, because I think the very minute we miss something in that redacted copy, then the attorney is going to say, King's X, I just took the redacted copy and assumed y'all done your job, or what you said you would do, and I gave that to the defendant. And we're going to get the, we're going to end up assuming that liability. If we give it to the attorney the way the state law requires it, then it's up to the attorney, and if there's going to be anybody that's going to ultimately end up being sued, it's going to be the attorney who turned over that information to the defendant. So I'm not supportive of those two.
What about the open record request? The work volume on that, based on the trend that we have seen, is increasing.
That's not an attorney position.
Is that
I would recommend that we monitor that activity, but not automatically go ahead and give a position at this time. I think we still need to monitor that and look at a workflow issue as it relates to that.
Okay. I think that's a good recommendation.
And then the CPS attorney was the one where we had suggested that attorney come from the economic crimes, the position that we had in economic crimes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But again, we were reminded that we really don't have any authority over that. We just can approve the position, and then the DA can put it wherever they want to.
Correct. And of course, I guess a middle ground. One of the statements that was made is that, yes, we do get some Southwest Border Initiative funds out of this position, not to the extent that it pays for itself. The rest of the time, or some additional time, is spent actually on economic crime forfeiture cases. That money goes into the Narcotics Task Force. So a middle ground would be, at a minimum, to charge part of the economic crimes position to the Narcotics Task Force, which is what those forfeitures support.
But do those forfeitures, how much of those forfeitures actually come from attorneys that are in the economic crimes area?
I couldn't tell you the percentage of that. Haven't looked that deeply into the situation.
What's the crime? Remind me what the crime analysis liaison is.
That's the one that's a result of the City of Fort Worth eliminating position that was responsible for coordinating police department employees as witnesses for cases. Obviously, that's something that keeps the case flowing.
I would like to put that in a pending category, and us have a conversation with the City of Fort Worth, maybe GK, you through Tom.
I've had part of a conversation, but I would suggest that exactly what you're doing. We can make that decision yet next week. And there's some information I talked with the chief about that thing, and I understand his reasoning for doing that, and I'll be more than happy to share that with the court at maybe next week.
But as I recall, the timeline on that is it used to be we had 3 people, and over time they have eliminated that down to where now we have nobody.
And they have one person right now. that does this. And I think there's a question if this needs to be a full-time or part-time position.
But at one point, I was told maybe that it's in the proposed budget they're eliminating the position altogether.
They are.
And historically, have we not had more than one person in that position?
You know,
I think in many years past, there were multiple people.
yeah, we did, but I think currently it's just one, is it not?
We've had as many as 3 from Fort Worth, and we've had as many as 2 from Fort Worth and 1 from Arlington in the recent past.
Recent past being this year, recent past being last year.
Several years ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
What have we had primarily for,
Fort Worth and 1 from Arlington until last year.
okay, let's talk about, when you talk about last year, are you meaning 12 or, come on for it, are you meaning 12 or are you meaning 13?
I mean 12. Arlington cut back in 12.
Okay, so Arlington cut back in 12, and then, so all of 13 thus far, we've had one full-time person from Fort Worth.
That's correct, until a month or so ago.
Okay, and I guess we didn't go in there and we really didn't make any argument to Arlington last year that, wait a minute, why are you cutting this one? Y'all did maybe, but we didn't have a chance.
We did, and we were told that was a done deal, and we'd have to absorb it
By
elsewhere.
the police chief over there?
Right.
Okay, so we need to have, from our perspective, we need to communicate from the top down that, you know, this is an issue and we're supposed to be partners in this deal, and
Absolutely,
and
yes.
this isn't a real nice way to treat the partners.
And it would be the prior chief over in Arlington, not the current chief, who's only been there, what, 6 months?
6 months.
Yeah.
Will Johnson?
And just another point of clarification, this function is being provided today by an investigator in the DA's office. And I think their point here is that the investigator is needed to do their normal duties. And plus its grade is way too high for what they're actually doing.
But this is an individual who has a health issue, and is a former Fort Worth policeman, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
So there's potentially an opportunity here.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we, you know, this is part of this individual's proposed duties. We have some other duties lined up for this individual also that something that's been growing on us the last several years, and mainly CJIS compliance. We've been getting word from Austin and from Washington that we're going to have to be more compliant and be more proactive on our criminal justice information system protections. There are a lot more efforts, a lot more audits being made, and we're going to be, our paperwork load is increasing there also.
If I could suggest that we could take this particular position and put it on the TBC list yet for next week, and let us do just a little more review, and then we'll bring you a recommendation.
Okay, I would agree with that.
I'd say both of those, let's do that.
Both of those being what, sir?
The attorney 5 for CPS and the crime analyst.
So we're talking about supporting the open records person?
No, I had that down as not supporting that one either. I think what they said was, is let's leave that kind of as a pending and
Monitor the load.
Monitor the load, and then
We need to do that. I don't know how much, I know that the DA has recommended it, but I don't believe that we were able to do our due diligence on that request yet, so
And the
we're going to
reclass?
need some time.
The reclass?
no,
Not.
not. I mean, that's the one where it moves everybody up, and I don't feel like that's something we need to do.
What's our procedure look like when we receive an open record request? Let's say a department, one of the departments receive an open record request. Is it automatically funneled over to the DA office?
It is sent to the district attorney's office, and it's also sent over to our office, so that we know that it's there also. The district attorney's office does the analysis, collects the information, and then notifies us when they send the response.
Okay. So it's the DA office that handles the collection of the data requested.
That's correct. Now, there's some open records requests that we know.
I thought it was over 120 hours.
There's some.
No, I'm talking to Debbie. I apologize for interrupting.
There's some open records requests, like if they want to know the salary of a certain person, then we simply send that information. I mean, we get a lot of those, but we just simply send the information because we know it's an open record. We've gone down that road several times before. So we'll just need to take a better look at that.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that we're going to do a vote on approving the budget office recommendations, except for the area of the crime analyst and the attorney 5 for CPS, and those are going to be on our to be considered list. Is that what the court has indicated?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Then we'll need a vote.
Move for approval of the recommendation.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
I guess that's it.
I have one item that I'd like to present the court. As you know, we're about to publish the salaries of elected officials, and I'd like to make two recommendations. First of all, I'd like to recommend salaries for all the different elected officials, and then also in our posting, I'm recommending that we list, by statute, we're required to list the non-judicial officers, but I'm recommending that we list all of the elected officials. That includes the district attorney, the state district judge, probate judge, county court at law judge, members of the commissioner's court, the sheriff, tax collector, county and district clerk, JP, and constable. So with that, I would like to recommend that these are the following salaries for each of those. Under the district attorney, proposed salary would be $193,402.70. And I'll give you this information. For the state district judge, it would be $158,000, which includes $140,000 of supplement from the state. With the probate judge, it would be $158,000, and part of that comprises $140,000 salary from the state. And by the way, the $140,000 also applies to the district attorney's office. The probate judge.
Do we get 140?
I'm sorry. Let me make sure I'm getting all this correct. The district attorney and the state district judge, each of their salaries are supplemented by $140,000. The rest receive no supplement. Probate judge would be $158,000. County court at law judges would be $158,000. The commissioner's court judge.
Excuse me, I apologize. All county judges. County criminal as well as the county court.
That's correct. Thank you, Your Honor. And I'll make sure that both the budget office and clerk's office gets this information.
Can I make a small comment? I'm sorry, but our salaries don't work out to exactly $158,000 since we pay biweekly. So can I give you the exact amounts?
Sure.
The county courts would be $157,999.92. The district court judges would be $157,999.80. I'm sorry, what did you say for the district attorney?
$193,402.70.
That's correct. I'm sorry.
What did you say for the?
County court.
Okay, no, I know why there was a difference. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, with the commissioner's court judge, this would be, my recommendation is $153,633.98. That amount would be the same for the sheriff. For county commissioner, tax assessor, county clerk, and district clerk, their salaries would be $143,633.98. That would bring that back in line with the policy that this court had used previously. The Justice of the Peace, that amount would be 108,149.96, and the Constable would be 97,849.84.
And I think all of those, GK, Debbie, and may have to adjust by pennies to get to.
If you would give us a range within $5 either way on those, we would appreciate it.
Great.
That should cover any issue that you're dealing with.
I appreciate that.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, just wanted to be clear.
That's staff recommendation.
I move approval of these salary adjustments.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
David, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay. That's all we have at this time, Your Honor.
Please remember the two that we talked about, Bill Thorne and Richard Garcia. We're closing court in memory of both those individuals. We're adjourned. No, I figured Linebarger knew what happened dinner or something. Thursday, I'm gonna try to go over to the court.